Hello, this is Orlando Mayor Buddy Dyer.
Welcome home. Soar into tower. We are ready for takeoff.
Por favor, manténganse alejado de las puertas.
Hey, it's Amy from DVC Clubhouse.
Hey Clubbers, it's Scott from DVC Clubhouse.
Hey, it's Kathleen from DVC Clubhouse.
Welcome aboard. It's Phil from DVC Clubhouse.
Hey, everyone, and welcome back to the Debrief podcast brought to you by DB. My New Year's resolution.
So close. Botched it in the first week.
Wait, no, actually, it doesn't count yet because although people will be hearing it in 2025, we're recording it in 2024.
Just barely by the skin of your teeth. All right, I'll give you the pass this time, but you get only one more shot at it.
All right, so welcome back to the Debrief podcast brought to you by DVC Clubhouse. This is Amy, and I am joined by Phil today. Hey, Phil.
Welcome aboard, guys. That was easy. You didn't have to remember everybody's names. So
it's true.
Happy 2025.
Yes. Happy New Year, everyone. Kathleen and Scott are not joining us today because they are celebrating the holidays back in Ohio with their family. So Phil and I we're flying not really flying solo because there's two of us, but we're riding tandem.
Thelma and Louise, that's us.
So how was your holiday, Phil?
It looked like Santa crash landed his sleigh in my family room. It was insanity. Oh, you'll like this one. So Luke gets a metal detector for Christmas. I'm on a conference call today planning out this presentation I've got to give later in the month, and I just break into hysterical laughter. And everyone's looking at me funny, and they go, "What are you laughing at?" So I just looked out my window, and it looks like a family of meerkats have taken up residence in my front yard. He went out with his metal detector, and his mother told him, "Don't dig any deep holes." Well, he would have been better off digging one really deep hole than the 18 really shallow holes that he dug in my front yard. Good news, though, he found a key that fits nothing and a quarter.
Oh, well, I mean, at least he found something. It kind of like, while maybe not worth anything, it's got to be exciting when you actually find something.
He's going to find my landscaping bill pretty soon.
Yeah, my holidays, Christmas is different because my kids are older and all of their boxes are smaller and they don't wake up quite as early. So this year it was kind of like they didn't really get out of bed until 9:30, which is early for them. That's early for my kids.
We don't know what time our children got up. We told them they were not allowed to rouse us until the sun was all the way up. But we know for a fact they were down here staring at the tree for quite a while before they came to get us.
Yeah, I remember those days where my kids, where we gave them the strict instructions. You cannot wake us up before 6:30 a.m. or something. It was a very low key kind of day. I kind of can't believe that it's come and gone already. It's just crazy. So,
Well, it hasn't gone yet. As we were discussing before we started recording, it's school vacation week. So I am just the cruise director coming up with itineraries and activities and excursions for a week and a half.
my older daughter has been working every day. So she has been pretty occupied. And my younger daughter, she was kind of, she had a cold. Well, she was sick towards the, right before Christmas. So she's kind of been low key too. So I really can't complain. They've been like very self-sufficient. So it's been, dare I say, a little bit relaxing.
I don't know if I'm jealous or I feel bad. We're in that age period where they're super excited and we're excited for Christmas and we're excited to do it together. But at the same time, you're like, gosh, I could use just a little relaxation. Just daddy's ears are really getting tired. If we could just tone it down just a tiny bit,
Yeah.
that would be fantastic.
Well, at least you have this podcast right now. At least like maybe 45 minutes where you can put the headphones on. And I mean, and I don't know if listening to my voice is relaxing, but at least it's a change of scenery.
I noticed we both jumped at the opportunity to record pretty
Yeah.
quickly. So I send out a text message that says, "Hey, when does everyone want to record?" And Scott and Kathleen said, "Well, we don't really know if we can this week. We're in Ohio. We need to see a lot of people." I said, "Okay, Amy, when are you available?" She's like, "Well, I'm not doing anything right now." All right, see you in a couple minutes.
And here we are.
And here we are.
And so we thought that today Phil and I would chat a little bit about Disneyland because Kathleen and Scott haven't yet been to Disneyland, so we don't really talk a lot about it because we'd like to them to be able to participate in whatever conversation we're having. So we thought that we would talk a little bit about, our experiences at Disneyland, if we think it's worth it for those of us who are on the East Coast to make a trip out there, what we love about it, maybe what we don't love about it. So Phil, remind me when the last time you were at Disneyland.
Last May, we were out there for well, let's see. I think we were on actual Disneyland property at Grand Californian for maybe 6 days, and we did 5 days inside the park. We were up in Burbank a little before that because my wife's brother and his wife and their family were up in Burbank. So we spent some time Griffin Park. We went to the actual carousel that Walt has one of his benches. That's still an open question. Which person has the actual bench? They both claim it. So we did that for a few days and then went down to Disneyland. That was actually our only trip. So we've only been once. That was the one and only trip we had
Okay.
made out there so far.
Was that 2024?
That would have been, yes, no, May of 23, because May of 24, we were down in Disney World together.
Oh, right. Correct.
So that was May
I
of
remember that.
23. And I almost, I was telling you before we started. So we're sitting at dinner on Saturday night with my in laws, my kids. It's Emily's birthday. And my kids start talking about how they haven't seen their cousins in California for a while. So, me being me, impetuous, impulse shopper and traveler, I immediately pull up my phone, like, oh, we can fix that. So, I start looking at all the school vacations, and the flights out to Disneyland for April vacation were insanely cheap. I couldn't believe it. I almost booked it, and I said, "Well, before I do that, I'm gonna go look at the crowd calendars." And I immediately put down my phone and said, "Nope, we're not going to Disneyland."
Yeah.
The crowd calendars were insane. Every one of them said, "You just trust us. You do not want to do this. Bad,
Right.
bad, bad idea."
Yeah, definitely cheap airfare does not really make up for a miserable standing in line and packed people everywhere.
Yeah, we were lucky last time it wasn't that crowded, so I think I got spoiled. I don't know that I wanna do Disneyland when it's packed. How many times have you been?
So I've been to Disneyland where I've actually like stayed at Disneyland and entered a park twice. I've stayed in Anaheim several times. My daughter does this songwriting program. Emma does the songwriting program every summer, and we stay in Anaheim for a night. And we always head over to downtown Disney for dinner, or we'll hit up one of the hotels for dinner. But only two trips where we've actually like gotten park tickets and gone into the parks and done the things. And so the last time I was there was almost a year ago. I was there last January and stayed at the villas at the Disneyland Hotel.
I remember
And then
that.
I was there, I think the November before that, I guess. Or like no, not so I guess it was November of 2022. I was there and I stayed at the Grand Californian for that trip. So I've stayed at both of the DVC buildings or resorts at Disneyland. So now you stayed at Grand Californian, right?
Yeah, I was gonna ask you how you compared the 2 because we actually had a trip planned out there. We were supposed to go in either April or May of 2020. Yeah, it was 2020 because I had to think back to the years. And obviously that plan went to you know where in a handbasket, so that trip had to be canceled. And we were due to stay. I had initially booked I don't know, one of the offsite hotels. I don't remember where it was. And I was in the process of changing it over to the Disneyland Tower. I decided I wanted to be on property, and that trip went away. So I'm curious how you would compare the two because there's just so much history at the Disneyland Hotel, but at the same time, it's changed so many times that it's not really the same, so to speak. So I'm curious how you compare the two since you've stayed at both.
You know, I think that just from a what feels like an immersive Disney experience, Grand Californian definitely gives you that more than the Disneyland Hotel, because the Disneyland Hotel, like, it just looks like it's a bunch of towers that just look like hotels, and I mean, honestly, I feel like if they built the villas at Disneyland Hotel at Disney World, I probably would like it less because I just feel like Disney World is not, it's in a bubble, and it makes sense that they're like, it doesn't feel out of place to have these tall towers.
Yeah, considering the surroundings.
Yeah, in the middle of Anaheim where you're like off, like, there's literally my room was looking at a residential area in Anaheim, versus at Disney where you feel like you're really leaving the real world and entering like this fantasy world. You kind of get that a little bit more when you stay at Grand Californian, where you kind of feel
You're
like you're in the
totally
bubble.
encapsulated. You don't
Yeah.
have to leave the bubble at all.
Right. But Disneyland Hotel, especially, I mean, I can't speak to the other towers because I don't know what they look at, like the original towers. But the DVC tower, part of it does like overlook just a road and a bunch of houses. But, that being said, what I really liked about it is that it felt like very throwback to kind of like vintage, like 1950s California. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Like it felt like when you think about like Palm Springs and like the Rat Pack and like what that type of like decor and feel is, that's kind of like the vibe that you get at the villas at the Disneyland Hotel, which I like appreciate because being from New Jersey and going to California and kind of feeling like immersed in this like kind of nostalgic California vibe, it does feel different than something that I would experience anywhere else. So the layout of the studio was like exactly the same as the layout, pretty much exactly the same as the layout of the new studios at the Island Tower. So this is kind of like the new DVC studio layout.
That's just the standard design they have now.
Right, like, the way that they made, like, Boulder Ridge, Beach Club, Boardwalk, and Saratoga Springs, like, they all had the same, like, footprint for those rooms, like, now, like, this is the new DVC studio footprint. But what I like about it and, when I stay at the Island Tower, I'll see if I like it as much because at the Disneyland DVC tower, there was not a balcony in my room. So having the bed close to the window and the Murphy bed closer to the door, I enjoyed that because it gave you kind of more open space. I'm curious to see because it's the same type of layout in the Island Tower, but you do have the sliders on the other side of the bed. So I'm kind of
Especially with the
curious
view
to
you're
see.
gonna have versus the view I'm gonna
Yes.
have. You went whole hog. I did a little points consolidation and stayed standard view. You're gonna have the beautiful view.
I did whole hog. I mean, I'm going for 2 nights. So I figured if I'm
Yeah,
going for
we're
2
going for
nights.
9, so I had to maybe
Yeah.
miser my points a little more.
Yeah. So I'm curious to see, I mean, just kind of as an aside about the Island Tower, how it feels having that bed right by the doors out, like, if that feels like it's in the way. But, overall, like, I thought that the Disneyland DVC tower was really nice. I mean, it's super convenient. It's a short walk to everything. I mean, it's Disneyland is so contained, and for anybody who has been there, you know that you can walk from park to park in minutes. And even though the DVC tower is probably the farthest point on property that you can get from an actual park, you can still be at a park in, like, 7 minutes. I think I timed it. And if
Yeah,
you
it's
walk
quick.
through yeah, if you walk through downtown Disney to the entrance of those 2 parks, like, you're there in no time. What I really enjoy the Palm Breeze bar that they built underneath the tower, I think that that place is great. Like, it had really good food, a really fun vibe, and it's located right in between the Disneyland, like, original pool with the monorails and then the new DVC pool, and it's kind of like you're kind of, like, sitting there in between the old and the new, and it is very cool. Like, there is something about being at the Disneyland hotel that makes you feel like even though it is this tower and it's not like this immersive kind of experience, it does make you feel like this, like, throwback to, like, OG Disney, because
Yeah,
it's
it's funny you mentioned
Disneyland.
that. I stayed at a Kimpton in Lauderdale a couple of months ago called the Kimpton Shore Break, and it it had that same 1950s feel, and that's the vibe they were going for. It's my new favorite hotel, and I travel so much, it takes a lot for a hotel to impress me. But they've got an old Ford T-Bird out front that you can go for rides in. They've got golf carts that'll take you the 2 blocks to the beach that have, like, these fiberglass molds that make them look like 1950s cars. All the appliances, the alarm clocks, the refrigerators in the room are stylized to look 1950s, but they're all modern. Even the room numbers are white frosted globes that light up that have the numbers hand painted on them. It felt like 1950s Rat Pack Boca Raton throwback. It was just the coolest thing ever. So, and it's especially cool considering the Disneyland Hotel wasn't owned by Disney until recently. Like, it was a Rather hotel. It was an agreement that they had. So to be immersed in that Disney feel, especially knowing it wasn't actually a Disney property, but knowing it's been there almost since the very beginning. I've got a book that's the whole history, and they used to run these little trams that had these side mounted benches. It's just been part of the park since the very beginning. It's the OG.
And, I had seen it was probably something on Disney Plus, or I don't even know where I saw this thing, but it was something that was talking about the history of Disneyland and how kind of like how Disney started to dip its toe into owning hotels. And it talked about how they bought this hotel from this family that kind of capitalized on the fact that Disneyland was popular, but that they built it to be very much like cater towards adults. Like they wanted adults to stay there. And you can see where there is kind of like an adult feeling to the Disneyland hotel that is different than you feel at other locations. And maybe it's getting a little bit less so because they got rid of the steakhouse, and so now you have, like, Goofy's Kitchen, but the Trader Sam's there and, like, the Tiki Terrace there, that to me feels like grown-ups wanna hang out there. It's not a place like, kids might think it's cool, but they don't wanna spend a lot of time there, and there's
That's what
something very
Pixar Pier is
cool.
for and the whole Pixar hotel. That's your kid's side over there. There you go,
Yeah,
kids.
exactly, exactly, like, that whole Disneyland hotel complex just feels a little bit more grown up than other Disney hotels.
Strangely, that's how I feel about all of the hotels over on Hotel Plaza Boulevard next to Disney Springs, being the original 1971 hotels that were on Disney property but leased to third parties. You really only had Polynesian Contemporary, the campground, and then those. And to this day, it just has a more adult feel to it than all of the stuff on property. So when we go, we've had work conferences there. Em and I have stayed there. We've done one night with the kids. The kids are not interested in that hotel. It just does not do it for them. I like it because I just think it's got a little more grown up, upscale feel to it.
Yeah, and I think what's kinda cool about it is that even though it feels grown up, it's grown up in, like, a Disney way. Do you know what I mean? Like, being at the like, sitting outside at their Tiki Terrace, overlooking the monorail pool, you know that you're at Disneyland, but it just feels less. Yeah, it just doesn't feel as, like, kid-centric as it does, like, creating, like, a cool experience for adults, and
For lack of a better term, it's not as kitschy.
yeah, yeah, and so, I mean, I really liked it. I mean, I think that it's totally different from Grand Californian. I mean, it's, like, really hard to compare them because, number 1, you've got the private entrance into Disney's California Adventure, and you can enter into Downtown Disney right from Disney's Grand Californian. And then you've just got this, like, majestic lobby. Like, it feels like the Disney of the '90s that we've all grown to love, whereas you kind of.
Wilderness Lodge with redwoods is how I
Yeah,
described it. It's
but
got
even
that same
grander.
feel, but yeah,
Like, it's
it's impressive.
majestic. Like, there's something
It is
about it that's just,
majestic.
like, majestic, you know? Even that fireplace, like, the hearth is huge. But it's yet cozy at the same time. Like, they did a really good job of creating, like, this really majestic feeling lobby that has these very comfortable, cozy nooks that make you find that you do wanna hang out there and you don't feel like you're just standing in, like, this cavernous hall, you know?
When we walked in there, it really felt Even more so than Grand Floridian, like walking into a true five-star deluxe hotel experience. It has that overwhelming, really, really nice feel.
Yeah, it has a presence, like, you have arrived when you
A
have walked into
presence.
that
There you go. That's
lobby.
what I was looking for.
Yeah,
Yes, it does.
and then what's so cool about it is the way that kind of, like, depending on which way you turn, you're arriving at something else that's, beautiful and amazing.
Was your experience like ours? I didn't know which way to turn. It took me 4 of the 5 days to figure out which corner of the lobby went where. I got lost in that lobby maybe 6 times, thinking maybe I was
Yeah,
going to the park, but I wasn't. I was going to the parking lot. No, that one goes out to the pool. It's really easy to get
yeah,
lost in that lobby.
it is, it really is, but it has that great the Hearthstone Lounge, which is that great, like, kinda lobby bar that serves food. I loved it there. I That's someplace that I really enjoy grabbing food at, even and again, it's like because it's so close and you can just pop out of a park if you want to. We would, one night we just popped out of the park because for whatever reason, I have really bad luck and it like always rains in Southern California when I'm there.
That's me in San Diego of all things. It's always warm and sunny here. I've never been to San Diego and not had sideways rain.
I had that experience too on a girls trip with my sister. It rained the entire weekend in May. We were like, "What is happening here? This is supposed to be like the most beautiful like climate on earth and it's raining sideways." But so it was raining and we decided just like pop in to the Hearthstone Lounge and grab some flatbread pizza. I think that the food at Disneyland is really really good. So, the Hearthstone Lounge is great. That the Grand Californian, what's it called? The GCH Grill and Bar by the pool is so great. And I mean, the buffet restaurant that they have there, the name is escaping me right now. It's fine. Like, it was good, but it's kind of like to me, it was just a little bit lacking in anything really exciting happening. They do have a character breakfast there, which we did not do. We only had dinner there. But to me, like, one of the crowning achievements of Disney dining is Napa
Napa
Rose.
Rose, I knew it was coming.
I mean, Napa Rose is to me, like, at Disneyland what California Grill is
I was
at
waiting
Disney
for that. Yeah.
World. And now would be a good time for me to remind people that if you can't get a reservation there, you can sit at the bar and you can order, their appetizers. I will say their portion sizes are small and it is expensive. So it is an expensive meal and you are probably not going to leave feeling stuffed, but you are going to have amazing, amazing food and service. And I wish that I lived closer just so that I could go to Napa Rose more frequently because it really is just a stellar dining experience.
So we've talked about the 2 of the hotels, I guess we could say, but I want to back it up just for those who haven't been there. We talked earlier about entering into the bubble, and you mentioned on the last episode with Hilton Head and it being hidden and not knowing it was there until you were kind of on top of it. I think that was one of the things that threw me. We had left Burbank and driven down to the parks, and I'm used to coming onto Disney World property. You come off the highway, everything's there. There's these giant signs you drive under. Once you cross onto property, it is clear. It is clear as day, even without the signs. It is clear as day. You have exited the I-4 and you are on Disney World property. It is just different. Coming into Disneyland, I think I was waiting for more. We get off the
We're
Harbor
waiting to like
Boulevard
have
exit.
that arrival moment.
Yes, that aha moment. We're here. We've arrived. Here we go, kids. And you come off the Harbor Boulevard exit, and there's just this little sign that says Disneyland with an arrow. And I take a left, and there's maybe like a parking garage and a parking lot across the street. And I pull into the parking lot of what looks like a really nice hotel, but there's nothing really insane about it. And you're at Grand Californian. There you are. Across the street is a Fleming's, there's a CVS, there's a 7-Eleven, and I'm staying in this enormous, beautiful, gorgeous 5-star Disneyland resort that you cannot get into unless you walk the reservation or pay a fortune. and there's the 7-Eleven right there behind the fence. It is a totally different experience entering into Disney property. We've all heard the stories about Walt and his blessing of size and how everything grew around Disneyland. And you just talked about looking down on residential neighborhoods. We have gotten so used to that Disney World feel where you are firmly inside the property of Disney and there's nothing but mangroves and water. Disneyland is very different. If you're looking for that experience, get it out of your mind right now because you're going to pull into Disneyland and not even know you're there.
It's true. And I mean, I have stayed, like I said, I stay there for a night when we go out over the summer for when Emma goes to the songwriting program. So we have to walk from the hotel that we stay at, which is like a Sheraton down the road.
But it's still closer to Disneyland than Bay Lake Tower is to Magic Kingdom.
Oh my god.
That's what
Oh,
throws you off.
absolutely.
It's
Like
right there.
yeah, it's so close, but I'm in this like hotel that on the corner there is like a CVS and there's the coffee bean and tea leaf and there's a cheesecake factory
I know
and there's
exactly where you
all,
are. It's
you know,
coming out.
yeah,
If you come out of,
yeah.
because I had to walk up to the convenience store, come out of Grand Cal, take a left towards, I forget which one that is. But yeah, you take a left and you walk, and there's the Cheesecake Factory right in front of you. It's next to the Flemings. I know exactly where
Yeah.
you are. It is right there, but it's like 300 steps to the Disneyland turnstiles.
Yeah, and then like you make you turn off of the main road walking towards like you walk under the security tents. But across from that, you've got like these motels. I actually stayed at one. I think it's called the Tropicana. The first time the girls and I went for like a real trip, we stayed there the first night because we didn't want to use our points or we might not have been able to get, a room at Grand Californian. But you're like literally like there was a Panera next to us, some like random like pizzeria, I think. And then you go and you have people on the street selling fruit out of like plastic containers.
Hey, do not knock that fruit. I had so much of that fruit when we were in California. There are stands everywhere. I would kill for them to put just one of those in each Disney World park. I could eat that fresh fruit out of those stands all day
No
long.
joke. I know. I never got it, but it does look delicious and so fresh. But then you just cross the street and there you go. Like it almost looks like you're walking into a bus depot. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, look, there's the monorail. And oh, look, there's Space Mountain. And then you walk through the security tents and you get to this junction where you've got downtown Disney in front of you, Disney's California Adventure to the left, and Disneyland to the right. And you're like at all three locations at one time.
Yeah, just spin in a circle. You can see it all.
Yeah,
It's nothing like
it's
walking down
wild.
the boulevard and the monorail goes over the top of you, and you're like, I'm next to a CVS. How is there a monorail
Yes.
overhead?
Right, exactly. So it is. It is a totally wild experience. And when, where we were staying, where that coffee bean and tea leaf is, like you can literally see, I think it's the backside of Radiator Springs. It's nuts. Like you really are just like, oh wow, like Disneyland is literally on the side of a
And I
road.
think if you look up and to the right, you can actually see the Matterhorn peeking up over the top of the fence from there as well.
Yeah,
How am I sitting
totally.
in the middle of a street at a bus stop with a bunch of people with their
Right.
shopping, looking at all of these attractions from the backside? Like, we think it's awful when we drive down Epcot Center Boulevard and we look up and there's the backside of Galaxy's Edge. We're like, oh,
Right.
thematic integrity is gone. I can see the
Right.
top of the Alps. And
Right.
here's the guy sleeping on the sidewalk, and there's the Matterhorn.
Yeah, exactly. And the crazy thing is too is that like yes, you've got some of these like more, modern hotel chains, but you also have these like motels that have
You
been
said the
there.
Tropicana, the candy canes there. There's the
Yeah.
medieval one, and they're all right. And they've been there since 1956. That's the crazy thing.
Yeah, that is totally crazy. So it really is this like weird kind of like you're being thrown back into like you're living like in two time periods. The time when Disneyland opened and then the present. And it's wild.
And
It's
when
really
Disneyland
wild.
opened, it was surrounded by nothing.
Yeah, which is like
You
yeah,
had
like
like
orange
Cattell,
groves.
you had Ball Road, there was a gas station on one corner. There was a bunch of undeveloped land where Rather was putting up the hotel, and that was it. And now you look around and you go, "Oh my gosh, what happened?" Like, it just exploded outward.
Right, right. And I mean, you wonder, like, if he had known how successful that was going to be, what he would have done, how he would have expanded. I'm really, now that we've got this expansion project allegedly happening, I'm really curious to see what that's gonna look like because, I mean, it's literally in the middle of the city. Like, I don't like, my mind's
Where do
eye,
you
like,
go
can't
with it?
conceive of it. Yeah.
And I've looked at Google Maps in the overhead. I'm like, how is this even gonna fit? But when you
Yeah, it's like
think about it,
highway and buildings.
yeah, he said it when they sat down for their press conference with the governor of Florida when they were forced to announce Walt Disney World after they were outed in the press by a silly mistake. He said outright that he wanted to they were unable to get a loan for Disneyland because no one had done this in the past. He knew in his head. He said he knew. I think he really hoped Roy wasn't on board, but they had to go to banks and a television studio to get a loan in order to put it up. And by the time they got to Walt Disney World, people were throwing money at them. Walt said himself, that he would have bought far more. They couldn't afford it. They were stretched so thin just to buy what they did. It's one of the reasons they had to have so many shell corporations in Florida. Once people figured out what was going on, that's why we have Bonnet Creek. Remember, Bonnet Creek is 500 acres that they could not buy because someone got wind of it. Bonnet Creek is shoehorned right into the corner of property. That was the last holdout that they really couldn't get. So I think he wanted to, and he learned after everything exploded around him. And that's why they went so crazy in Florida. Well, that and the fact they wanted to build a city they never could. But
Oh, right. And I mean, they did have I think that in Florida also, like, they bought swampland and it probably for like, your Joe Schmo who was going to like want to, build like the candy cane in version at Disney World, you're probably not looking at this land thinking this is something that was attainable for some like aspiring hotel owner, you know? At least in California, it was like solid ground. There was
this
like
is
actual
very
earth,
true.
solid earth. So tell me what you feel like, how you feel about the parks at Disneyland.
I love them. I Okay, I take that back. I like California Adventure. I know a lot of people love California Adventure, but as evidenced by my last little tangent I went on, I am such a Disney history geek. Of all the things I love about Disney, I live, breathe, sleep, eat Disney history. I am fascinated by every facet of the history of the parks. So California Adventure is cool. It's much cooler in its current iteration versus what it was when it opened up. But Disneyland, I love Disneyland. My sister-in-law was very nervous when we went. She grew up around Disneyland. They still live close to Disneyland. They're there all the time, and she kept saying, I keep feeling like you're gonna be disappointed. You're so used to Disney World, I think you're gonna be disappointed. I just don't want you to be let down." It's amazing. It's definitely compact. It's tighter, it's smaller, but there's so much history there, right down to the half white and half red bulb on the corner. Just there's so much history there. I think we said it in the last podcast or the one before. You can feel Walt in that park. I love the parks. I love the ability to walk between the parks. I love how
Mhm.
everything is so close. I love all the original rides. I love how they managed to fit everything together in so small of a footprint. Their Rivers of America are awesome. Fantasmic right there in the middle of Disneyland. Their Haunted Mansion is fantastic. Their Pirates is better. There are so many things I love about that park, and we'll be back. I can't wait to go back. I was not disappointed at all. I think I was able to take in maybe 25% of what I wanted to take in just because I was so overawed and so overwhelmed with how much was there to see and experience that I felt like I missed most of it. And it's tiny compared to Walt Disney World. We were there for 5 days. How did I miss most of it? And we left after 5 days feeling like we didn't see and experience everything I wanted to. It's amazing to me that they can do all of that in such a small footprint. I think it's more convenient. I think their food is better. I mean, I could go on and on and on. You said the things we didn't like about it. I'm struggling to figure out what I didn't like about it other than just that lack of open space around you. And I don't know that's necessarily a negative. It's just not what I'm used to.
Right. I feel like there is something about when you walk onto Main Street USA in Disneyland, there is a very distinct feeling of, again, like this kind of like traveling back in time. And it's not just because of the style of the architecture, it's because of feeling feeling that nostalgia and being really taken back to that this was Walt's park. And you can feel that. There, don't get me wrong, Main Street USA at Magic Kingdom is impressive, it is awe-inspiring. You walk on and you're just like, "Oh my gosh." But it's like a different magnitude than what happens when you walk onto Main Street USA in Disneyland, where you just kind of feel like it's almost like you've just, like, arrived in, like, a simpler time. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's a perfect example of why bigger and flashier and more overwhelming is not necessarily better. I think it's overwhelming at Walt Disney World. You walk in and it's just grander. There's more lights, there's more windows, the buildings are taller, the street is wider, there's more going on. The castle at the end is so much larger than what you're used to. You walk onto Main Street USA in Disneyland and you just feel like you're home, but home in a different time. I really feel like I got that comfort, that nostalgia, that perfect idyllic small town feeling in Disneyland. And I don't want to say the illusion of it at the Magic Kingdom at Disney World, but it's not, it doesn't capture you like Main Street at Disneyland does. You just so easily fall back in time and feel like you're part of it, where you feel like maybe you're overpowered by it a little bit. So it's not a bad feeling to be overpowered, but you
Yeah.
don't feel part of it like you do at Disneyland.
I think that's what it is. I think that when you step onto Main Street USA in Disneyland, not only the just like the aesthetic of it, but there are characters just everywhere. Like what you walk in and like Mickey Mouse is right there. And like all of them, Mickey, Donald, Minnie, like
Yeah,
they're all
Wendy
right
Darling just
there.
comes up and starts talking to you. You're like,
Yeah,
where is this at Disney World?
exactly. I mean, then you're like walking down and you've got the horse-drawn carriage and the Dapper Dans, but because it's smaller, like they're all right there. It really is like you are on what really could be a real street. Whereas like Main Street USA, yes, like it is the recreation of something on a grander scale of what anybody would have ever experienced in that time. Disneyland feels like the authentic thing with the people. Like there's like a hustle and bustle, but it's not like a busyness. It's like a hustle and bustle of, like I said, like the characters, the Dapper Dans, the carriage. You continue down towards the castle and then you see Captain Hook walking by you. Like it's just like a totally different experience where you could just, and there's benches everywhere. We
Yeah,
talked
there's
about this.
benches, there's trees.
There,
There's still trees at
yeah,
Disneyland, ladies and gentlemen.
exactly. And so you could sit down on a bench, around the hub and take it all in and see so much and experience so much without even moving at all.
Part of me wishes we talk about it being that little small town. I wish I had been around back when they had the bandstand and they had date night at Disneyland back in the 50s and 60s where they'd bring in these small bands. You had Holiday Hill and you would stroll down Main Street and just go on a date on a Saturday night to go dancing with a live band. Like it feels like what a Hallmark movie is versus what a Disney Plus Christmas movie is. The Hallmark movie
Yes.
is this little tiny town, and Disney Plus is this, they've got a big city Christmas movie. It's just a sense of scale and belonging.
Well, I feel as though, like, when you think about a fairy tale, it feels grand. It kind of feels like Magic Kingdom. And I posted this on the Facebook group, on the DVC Clubhouse Facebook group, where I said that Cinderella's castle at Magic Kingdom is like Barbie's dream house, whereas the Sleeping Beauty castle at Disneyland is like the little people, like the Fisher Price little people dollhouse.
No, what it
And
is it's a 1960s or 70s dollhouse versus a 2020s enormous plastic Barbie dream house.
yes.
My daughter
Yeah.
has both, and one just evokes a very different feel from the other.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, and then even when you walk through the Sleeping Beauty castle and you get into Fantasyland, even that, I mean, it is tight. Like, everything is right next to each other, right on top of each other.
Look forward. There's Monstro. There's Dumbo. There's Alice right there. There's Pinocchio.
Yeah.
There's Snow White.
It's
They're all right
literally
on top of
like
each other.
it's kind of feels like the difference between, like, a storybook and, like, a full on, like, fairy tale. Disneyland's like a storybook. It's like this is like what when you think about, like, the stories that you like, the storybooks that you had as a kid, that when you would open them up and flip the pages, like, that's what you're stepping into in Fantasyland. Whereas Magic Kingdom is kind of like the full-length animated feature, like,
Yeah.
it's
The live action full length.
right, exactly, exactly. So and then, I mean, when you get over to the rivers of America and you have New Orleans Square and Frontierland and what else is over there?
Just stop at New Orleans Square for a second. You think about what it feels like to be immersed in something. You walk by Pirates of the Caribbean in Walt Disney World and you've got that whole plaza and it's cool. It's a recreation. You go over towards Haunted Mansion and you've got kind of a transition, but you've got Rapunzel up on one corner and you've got the river over there and you've got the mansion. Now you do it at Disneyland, and there's this gate for pirates, and then you go over to Blue Bayou, and there's this little alley that you go down, and it's just like being in an alley in New Orleans. It's small and it's tight, and there's shop windows, and it's dimly lit, and it's an actual doorway that goes into this beautiful restaurant. And upstairs is an art gallery, which was actually supposed to be another apartment for Walt that they were building when he passed. You are fully immersed in that one little spot, probably more than anywhere I've ever been at Walt Disney World. And
With
it's a
the exception
tiny,
of
tiny
one
place.
place. You know what it makes me think of? It makes me think of the Morocco Pavilion at Epcot.
Yes, exactly. Where you can get lost in those little alleys and warrens down there. That's exactly what it feels like. You are absolutely
Yeah.
correct.
Yeah, I that's what I love about New Orleans Square too. It's like you feel like you're walking through a real life place, not just a recreation of a place. Like you're actually there because you do have these alleys and these storefronts and these like, restaurants that you can pop into and it is just and then of course the architectural detail that they paid to it. It's just it really is like such a special place. Really, really truly. And then they do all these like really fun overlays at Christmas time with like the Haunted Mansion and It's a Small World. I think, when you talk to people who are from the West Coast who grew up with Disneyland being their park versus Disney World, they those of us, many of us who go to Disney World all the time may not be able to kind of understand like the appeal to this smaller park, but it is really like and honestly, even talking through it now, like, right now, it really is, like, driving home for me, like, what it is about Disneyland that makes the people who are familiar with it love it so much because it really feels like this place that you can kind of get lost in these, like, little nooks and crannies, whereas, Magic Kingdom is just expansive, and yes, it's fun to walk into the, pirates, but, like, the attractions at Disney World, even though they are kind of immersive, they are standalone. Like, that is a standalone structure when you enter into Pirates, or it's a standalone structure when you go past the gates to go into Haunted Mansion and you're, like, totally set back there. At Disneyland, it's, like, right there. You're, like and they're right next to each other. They are, like, buildings that are right
And they
next to each
somehow
other.
fit. That's the incredible thing to me. They did such an amazing job of taking all of these things and putting them in such a small space and making them fit, not just physically, but thematically and aesthetically and emotionally. They just fit.
Yeah, it really is a very there's something about it, like, the Jungle Cruise building is just
2 stories. It's
yeah,
so cool.
it is so cool, and then, I mean, I even think that even when they added Galaxy's Edge, adding it beyond, like, Frontierland, like, it kinda works. I just think that even though that feels like maybe a departure from, like, what Disneyland like, what we would think of it, it just feels like it makes sense based on where they put it and how it kind of transitions from one land into the next. I think they did it a good job of that too.
We've been talking about all the other lands, and I think it kind of brings to mind for me the one thing I dislike about Disneyland. If you think our Tomorrowland is awful, go visit Disneyland's. With the exception of Autopia, it's just terrible. I mean, the one thing it's got going for it is it still has the submarines. I'll give it that just because that's cool and that's very early Disney and they've managed to hold on to it. But the little narrowing pathway by Star Tours makes the pathway between Peter Pan and Small World seem easy by comparison. It's just
Yeah.
every time I think that our Tomorrowland is bad, I just think back to Disneyland and go, well, it could be worse.
Yeah, well, and even where that like that Tomorrowland just feels like it's kind of set off to the right and the rest of the park is all to the left. Like I have no reason to go over to that part of the park because it just feels dead. Like it just doesn't really feel like, like we talked about like that kind of kinetic energy. You kind of lose it over there.
With the exception of their DVC lounge there, which is amazing.
Well, I don't think it was open when I went.
It was
So,
open when we went. It was fantastic compared to what we have in Epcot, but we'll wait to see what the new ones look like. Maybe we'll outdo it a little bit,
yeah.
whatever's left over of Frontierland, but we're getting off track if I go down that road.
Yeah. Well, and then to hop over to Disney's California Adventure, there are parts of that park that I really love. I do kind of think that it is like a little bit of it kind of like suffers from the same thing that Hollywood Studios does, where it's kind of like a hodgepodge of different things like all in one place.
Yes, but I think their things are so much better.
I totally. Like I think that Radiator Springs is to me I think maybe my favorite land in all of Disney. Well, of the two places that I've been, Disneyland and Disney World. I will not bring the overseas parks in because I think that I would probably end up eating my words.
Tokyo Disney Sea, I'll see you at some point, I swear.
Yeah. But Radiator Springs is just like to me, it's like Disney Imagineering at its best. Like they
Kevin
hit it out
Rafferty,
of the
you
park.
are a god amongst men for putting that together. We can pick on him for Minnie and Mickey's Runaway Railway, but when it comes to his contributions, his crowning achievement was Radiator Springs. It is just so visually stunning.
It is absolutely, and I love the Grizzly Peak area. Like when you walk out of Disney's out of the Grand Californian into that area of the park. First of all, like, the fact that they themed that area of the park to, like, the hotel so that you actually feel like you're leaving your hotel in the middle of a national park and walking into the actual park. Like, that is so cool, and that to me is, like, also Disney Imagineering at its finest, where it picked a theme and it followed through with it. It committed 100%, and you really feel like you're there. I love that whole area. That water ride, the Grizzly River Run, that thing, you get really wet on that.
Yeah, I was actually thankful we were staying at Grand Californian because I took the kids on it. Nobody else wanted to go. So it was just me and the kids. And we trudged our way back to the room, just soaked to the bone. We had a lot of fun, but thank goodness we could go back and change and did not have to spend the rest of the day in that park that soaked.
Yeah, that is like a huge perk because you will get soaked. For me, I think that something that this park kind of suffers from, which is different than any other of the Disney parks that I've ever been to, is when you walk through the turnstiles, you don't necessarily know what you've arrived into. Like it just kind of feels very nondescript. And even so, like, even when you get to like where like to the crossroads where you can either go right to go to Grizzly Peak or go straight to go to Pixar Pier or Radiator Springs or left to go to Adventures Campus, there's really no major kind of like fanfare happening. It's just very much like, okay, you're here. Now which way do you want to turn?
But it's not different than Hollywood Studios. I mean, it's got the same feel walking through the front and coming
Oh
down that
no, I
street. And then
just
do I go to Toy Story? Do I go to Star Tours? Do I go over to Echo Lake? It
I
just,
feel like because the Man's Chinese Theater is at the end of, is kind of at the end of that long stretch. there is like this depth where like you feel like you're
And
someplace.
there's a start and a stop. Yeah, exactly. I
Yeah.
get exactly what you're saying. It at least dead ends there and you have to take a turn versus
Yeah.
California Adventure where you go in and it's just a couple of streets that go in odd directions.
Yeah, and like a bunch of different shops. And now I will say on the corner of one of those streets is the Carthay Circle restaurant and lounge, and I ate at the lounge, and it was excellent. The food was excellent. Some people recommended some cocktails to me that were really delicious. So, I would say as far as in theme park dining, I think that is the best in-park restaurant that Disney has to offer.
We'll have to go there. We did not hit it our last trip. I had wanted to, and nobody else wanted to go with me, but we didn't get there.
And I think especially because you are like a Disney history buff, the photography in there, like you would love it. And because that's the theater that Snow White premiered at, so it has all of the like old posters and ticket stubs from when that movie premiered. So it's very cool. It does have a lot of history there, which is fun to take in.
I felt that way about Plaza on Main Street. They've got all the old photos of Walt in the original park, and yeah, that gave that same vibe, but on the Disneyland Main Street side. So yeah, I'm gonna have to put that on my list for next time we go back.
And another thing that I really love, like like as I'm getting older, I'm not like a huge thrill ride person, but that Incredicoaster is a lot of fun. And the view from like the top of it, looking out at just basically California. It's like you've got Disneyland, but then you have like California in the distance. I wrote it at sunset, and I was just like taking in the views around me, and it was absolutely beautiful. So I think that there's that too. It's like although it's like in this very condensed area, you are like in the middle of California. And from these like higher vantage points, like you get to see some of that.
Did I ever tell you Mackenzie grew an inch overnight for Incredicoaster? I didn't tell you this story.
No.
So we go over one day and she is determined to ride Incredicoaster and she goes running over and I said, I don't think you're going to make it, but let him check your height. She goes over and she's a good quarter to a half inch shy of the height marker. So the next day we go in, rope drop, and she runs right to Incredicoaster. And I stand maybe, I don't know, 20 yards back. And I'm just laughing. And I say to the cast member, she didn't make it yesterday. So I don't know what makes her think she's going to make it today. And she runs over. And I swear we did not alter her shoes. We did not put anything in there. We didn't try to break any rules. I am 20 yards back waiting for this girl to be disappointed again. And she walks underneath. And the guy says, no, she's good. Go, what do you mean she's good? Yesterday she was a half inch short. He says, I don't know what to tell you, but she's good today. So over the course of 24 hours, somehow that girl grew an inch just to ride Incredicoaster.
For Disney magic.
Still trying to figure that one out.
Well, good for her because that ride is fun. And then downtown Disney, I think is like a fun place. It's like it's I don't even think you can compare it to like Disney Springs.
No,
because
it's
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 tiny,
apples and orangutans. It's totally different feel.
but it's got some really good restaurants. And I kind of feel like it does give you like just like a little bit of a especially like I was saying I like it because when you stay at these like hotels that are not Disney hotels but are 10 footsteps away, even if you don't buy a theme park ticket, you can walk right into downtown Disney and kind of feel like you are still immersed in that because you've got the monorail running on one side, you've got the Grand Californian on the other side. If you walk down to the end, you see the sorcerer's hat that leads you towards the Disneyland Hotel. So it gives you like a little bit of a taste of being at Disney. And I think that that's like something that Disney Springs doesn't give you. It's like if you're not staying at Disney World and you go to Disney Springs, you know that you're at Disney World, but it's not like you necessarily feel totally like you're there. Whereas, like, at Downtown Disney, it's like you're there because, like we said
You're in the
before,
middle of it. You're surrounded by everything that
yeah,
is Disneyland.
you can see 2 hotels and 2 theme parks from, like, standing in one spot in Downtown Disney and feel like you're at the heart of it. So, I think that that's, like, what makes it feel really fun for me is that it's kind of like just this, like, little neighborhood that's nestled between the parks and the hotels. with, a little bit of like Disney flair.
Yeah, 5 of 5 stars, would recommend.
Absolutely. So anybody listening to this, if you've been like debating whether or not you should go, I mean, I just feel like as a DVC member, having the ability to potentially use your points to go out there, everyone has to do it at least one time.
Even if you can't use your points, if you are a Disney fan, I think the best recommendation I could give it is just prior to that. We had gone through those awful years, and my Disney spirit was pretty low with things being shut down and not coming back fully. And we were kind of repeating experiences. And I wasn't feeling it for a while. And we took a trip out west to Disneyland. And boy, did that just re-spark everything. I was right back in the fold. That was all it took. I reconnected. I think people will say that have been to Disney World that it's disappointing, it's smaller, it doesn't have the same feel. It's smaller. That's the best I can give you. And it might not have the same feel. It's a different feel. It doesn't mean it's worse. I think it's so much better in so many different aspects. And it made me go back to Disney World and appreciate the things we have. But I will also say it made me critical of Disney World in a lot of ways because of what they can do so well in Disneyland. You've got to question why they're not doing it on the East Coast because they do a lot of things better. We've talked about it in previous episodes. We could have a
Yeah.
whole other episode on dining at Disneyland, a
Yeah.
whole other episode, and run out of time. Being able to keep the nostalgia factor, not having addition by subtraction, being able to put so many things in a small spot and keep the thematic integrity. They just do it right on so many levels there.
Yeah. They do. And, like we've said, maybe it's the difference between it being a locals park versus a tourist park, and they can kind of get away with it at Disney World because people are kind of coming once in a lifetime, once every 5 years. Whereas at Disneyland, their bread and butter is the people that live nearby that are going to come over and over and over again. And they need those people to want to come over and over and over again.
Yeah, and I've said it before, having all of those restaurants and hotels and everything a quarter mile around the park, you can walk everywhere else so easily. They have to up their game. They're forced to maintain a higher standard because there are other options.
Right.
Chances are, if you're on Disney World property, especially if you're staying on property, you don't have a whole lot of other options. It's 14 miles to get somewhere else. At Disneyland, it's 140 steps and you're at a phenomenal restaurant or another hotel. They have to keep it together. But from the park standpoint, the fact that, they always say it's not a museum, it has to change, but they've done a really good job of keeping it updated and giving new stuff while still maintaining the magic that made it so successful in the first place.
Totally agree.
All right. Well, I said we were going to go 30 minutes and we just went an hour and we could keep going if we wanted to. That just shows you how much we both love Disneyland.
Yeah. Yeah, it did not feel like an hour.
Nope, we blew through an hour pretty quick. Any
Yeah.
last thoughts?
Nope, that's it. Because if I start another thought, like you said, I'll just keep going. So
Yeah, we'll hold the dining for another time. Whole
yeah,
other conversation. Well,
exactly.
I miss Scott and Kathleen, but it was fun to talk about Disneyland for a little bit.
It was.
All right, folks. Well, as always, thanks for playing along. Happy 2025. By the time you hear this, we will be in a new year. Unfortunately for all of you, I will be the same old me despite the turn of the calendar. But if you liked what you heard, if you could head on over to Apple Podcasts, give us a like, some positive reinforcement, a 5-star review, that would be very much appreciated. Amy?
And please join us on the Facebook group DVC Clubhouse. We have a lot of fun banter over there. We've also got we're on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube, where Scott and Kathleen do a lot of Disney World dining reviews, and we post some of the hotel room tours and some other fun stuff. So check us out there. And until next time, we'll DVC you real soon.
See you guys.
And so our journey comes to an end.
Oh, no, please, can't we go back to page 1 and do it all over again?
Started this thing together, and that's how we'll finish it.
Because that, my friends, is where the magic lives.